One of those threats is the rise of IS in Southeast Asia as the group becomes displaced in the Middle East. The extremist group has taken over the city of Marawi on the island of Mindanao in the Philippines after local insurgents besieging the city raised the Islamic State flag. President Rodrigo Duterte has imposed martial law on the island and vowed to destroy extremist groups trying to align themselves with Islamic State. Joining me now via webcam from Manila is political scientist and author Richard Heydarian. Thank you very much for your time today. Can you bring us up to date with the latest information on this situation that you have?
Well, I mean, one of the biggest problems is that there's a lot of fog of disinformation as far as the coverage of the Marawi siege is concerned, because different groups have different kind of agendas. I think the sympathizers of the ISIS and the terrorist groups want to exaggerate the scope of their activities and the scope of their ability to actually inflict damage in Marawi, while some people in the Philippines who want a more decisive response are also trying to exaggerate the situation in order to justify perhaps a martial law all across the country, not only in the island of Mindanao. But what's happening right now, I think, is a continuous mopping out operation by the Philippine Armed Forces. A similar situation happened back in 2013, the siege of Zamboanga, and it took more than 2 weeks for the government to get the situation under control. My hunch is that we may see a similar situation here, except the difference this time is that we're talking about ISIS affiliate groups and possibly the presence of foreign fighters among the Maute group who launched this attack.
Now, I just do want to alert our audience that there have been reports of killings and hostages taken. What has been the Philippine government's response so far?
Well, I think, as your audience may know, Duterte had to cut short his visit to Russia. It was a 5-day visit, and he had to cut it short by the second day. So he came back and immediately declared a martial law. The Philippine Armed Forces are fully mobilized all across the Mindanao region, and the entirety of the Philippines is now under a state of emergency. Now, I think President Duterte is really under mounting pressure. He's the first Filipino president from the island of Mindanao, so there's a high expectation on him that he will deal with this problem. The issue is that, for the first year, in his first year in office, Duterte obsessively pursued a war on drugs. And at the same time, much of his peace negotiations was focused on the communist rebels rather than the Muslim insurgent groups. I think that created some kind of a vacuum that is now being exploited by ISIS affiliate groups across the country. So he has to catch up, and he doesn't have all the time. At the same time, he has to justify, per the Philippine Constitution, why does he need to declare martial law? Why not less draconian measures such as just declaring a state of emergency or lawlessness? Because for martial law to be invoked, you need to have all-out rebellion or invasion. So he has to also answer certain legal questions to the Philippine Congress and potentially even the Philippine Supreme Court if the Philippine Supreme Court steps in down the road.
The return of foreign fighters from the IS battleground is something that Australian authorities are also dealing with. How big a problem is radical Islam in the Philippines, and for how long has it been?
The problem of Islamic insurgency has been there for almost 4 decades, if not more, because of the marginalization of the Muslim minority in the Philippines, particularly in Mindanao. But over the past few years, the insurgency has morphed into much more troubling forms. And now, with the rise of the groups like ISIS, now you have a lot of indigenous extremist groups like Abu Sayyaf, Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters, and newcomers like Maute trying to use the ISIS flag, the ISIS brand, to mobilize support. And so far, they're very successful. And as you mentioned a while ago, as the ISIS command gets defeated in Raqqa and Mosul, they're looking at branching out around the world. And Mindanao seems like a kind of a very vulnerable target that they could look at. And unfortunately, fighters from across the region, Indonesia, Malaysia, among others, who have been also involved with the ISIS, could join in. And there are indications that some of them have already joined the Philippine-based ISIS affiliate groups.
Richard Heydarian in Manila, thank you very much for explaining the situation to us this evening.
My pleasure.